Please welcome David Swanson.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Alan and Diane, for bringing me here, and all of the groups that are here, and thank you to this congregation for hosting this kind of event. I will be very nonpartisan, although I have certain things to say about a couple of major parties. I don't work for either of them. I especially want to thank Veterans for Peace for all the work they do and for having produced the Declaration of Impeachment, which is simply the Declaration of Independence with a few words changed. It still reads exactly like the crimes of the current King George. And David Klein is going to be very, very badly missed. I had no idea until I heard that announcement, and we should take what he has done with his life as an example and go out and do the same. On a lighter note, I went to a party yesterday in Washington, D.C., where there's not that much to celebrate, but this was a goodbye and good riddance party for Alberto Gonzalez. And you won't hear that much about it on the news, except maybe on a local radio station, but there was a bill introduced in July to impeach Gonzalez, and it was gaining support during the August recess. In fact, a bunch of Congress members signed on this month, even though he'd already agreed to resign. This was not the first time that a movement to impeachment had helped to force out an unjust attorney general. And an effort to impeach Richard Nixon forced him out. And an effort to impeach Harry Truman led to the Supreme Court checking his abuses of power. In fact, the threat of impeachment alone is usually enough to restore a level of justice and democracy in Washington, D.C. A promise not to impeach, on the other hand, tends to encourage abuses of power and is itself an unconstitutional abuse of power. I wanted to mention Gonzo's departure because it is the only good news I have. None of the policies Gonzalez advanced have been reversed, and we are unlikely to see an honest attorney general anytime soon. 9 of the 10 articles in our Bill of Rights are in tatters, and they don't make us house soldiers in our homes, which is the 10th and remaining right, because they tax us to pay for barracks and bases in this country, plus dozens of permanent bases in Iraq and Afghanistan, and in fact, about 1,000 permanent military bases in other people's countries all over the world. We have lost the right not to be detained and held without charge. We have lost the right not to be tortured, the right not to be spied on in our homes. We have lost the World Trade Center, a piece of the Pentagon, the city of New Orleans. We have moved dangerously close to the point of no turning back on global warming. We have encouraged the proliferation of weapons around the world, driven much of the world to hate our nation, watched a general this week brag to Congress about how many weapons we are selling to Iraq, where the term "we" now refers to private companies that will profit from those weapons sales, the private companies that our grandchildren will pay for the reconstruction of Iraq that never happened, the private companies that we enrich every time we stop at a gas station. We have lost the right to organize a labor union, and we are rapidly losing the right to protest. We are penned into Orwellian free speech zones or arrested for holding a sign on a street corner. Should a catastrophe hit the United States, everything is in place for martial law. And while it cannot find the decency to hold Bush administration outlaws in contempt, our Congress holds peace activists in contempt of Congress when the Capitol Police don't tackle and beat them in the halls of Congress. Well, I've got news for you. Not only is there a huge march and civil disobedience action today in Washington, D.C., but we are about ready to hold the Congress in contempt of the citizens of the United States of America. Yesterday, there was a second study published. There have now been 2 studies done on how many Iraqis have died violent deaths because of our invasion and occupation. The first was done by Johns Hopkins over a year ago and has been updated by Just Foreign Policy. The second was done by a well-respected British organization. The results of each study fall within the margin of error of the other. We are responsible for the deaths of between 1.1 and 1.3 million Iraqis. Another 4 million Iraqis out of a population of 25 million have been displaced from their homes, half of them to other countries. Most Iraqis lack adequate water and electricity. Half the nation is in need of emergency assistance. A quarter of children are malnourished. And it's working. And more than that number of children are traumatized and filled with hatred. A majority of Iraqis say things are getting worse from the surge and want the U.S. occupation ended. The progress that General Petraeus talks about not only is based on numbers he won't explain, not only is based on claims disputed by numerous other sources, but it's progress the Iraqi people don't recognize. Make no mistake, the occupation is a bigger disaster for Iraqis, for our troops, and for our safety each year and each month that passes. We are dropping 5 times the bombs this year as last year, including cluster bombs. If Bush and Cheney had unlimited troops, they would send another 500,000 to Iraq, and the Iraqi people would still not be pacified. Bush is bringing a minimal number of troops home for only one reason. He has to. He has no more troops to send. This is not a victory for Petraeus or for Congress. This is a victory for the counter-recruitment movement. If you want to make a difference, go to schools and tell kids the truth about military service. Get a book called Army of None and read it. Nothing in Iraq is getting better, and nothing is about to get better. Petraeus is arming one religious sect to kill another and measuring success now by body counts. But everybody he counts is 10 friends and relatives eager to kill the occupiers. This is not a war that can be won or lost. It is an occupation and a crime, and all we can do is stop committing it. According to the Republicans, there's my mention of one party there. According to Republicans in Congress, the real danger lies in people who would dare question the authority of a general. I created a website called betrayusreport.com, so I must be part of the real problem. But then so must Petraeus's boss, Admiral Fallon, who calls him, and you'll have to excuse me because these are his words, not mine, an ass-kissing little chicken shit. Somehow the Bush White House seems to have more than its fair share of ass-kissing little chicken shits. I watched Bush's speech the other night on ABC, in which Bush admitted, as his report yesterday essentially admitted, that none of the so-called benchmarks have been met. Senator Reid gave a good but vague and non-committal Democratic response, and then George Stephanopoulos of ABC, a noted ass-kissing little chicken shit, came on and immediately explained what it all meant. He didn't remind anyone of all the promises Bush had made back in January. Instead, he announced that the Democrats can talk about ending the so-called war, but cannot do anything about it because they don't have 67 Democrats in the Senate. This is a lie. Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid can announce tomorrow, and could have announced 9 months, several hundred troops, and tens of thousands of Iraqis ago, that they will not bring up any more bills to fund the occupation. A Republican proposal to fund the occupation can be blocked by 41, not 67 Democrats. The Democrats could also pass bills ending the occupation or funding only the withdrawal and have them vetoed again and again. This is not a secret. There is no dispute that Congress has this power. Senator Feingold held hearings at the start of this year at which experts overwhelmingly agreed that Congress can simply stop providing funding. Bush has plenty of money to bring the troops home, and Congress can provide new money for that purpose. Congress can provide funds for the reconstruction of Iraq by Iraqis. Congress can encourage the United Nations and the Arab League to organize transition efforts. Congress can ban the use of any funds for an attack on Iran. It is only a question of the will to do it. Now, there's no question where the public stands. Democrats.com, which is not the Democratic Party, but is a group I work for, commissioned a polling company this week to ask the public what it wanted. 40% said they want all the troops home in 6 months, and Bush should use money he's already got to do it. Another 14% said bring them all home in 6 months, and we'll give you $50 billion to do it. So that's a majority. Get them home in 6 months. Another 19% said get them home in a year, we'll give you $200 billion. And only 13% supported what Congress is considering doing. Another $200 billion with no strings attached. 79 Congress members, including only 2 Floridians, Corinne Brown and Alcee Hastings, have signed a letter saying they won't vote for more money unless it, quote, redeploys the troops by January of '09. This effort is led by Progressive Caucus chairs Barbara Lee and Lynn Woolsey. Woolsey is getting a lot of heat in D.C. right now because someone published the transcript of a private conference call on which she advocated pushing primary challengers against pro-war Democrats. But Lynn is not only right, morally, hers is a pro-Democratic Party position. Primaries are good for parties as well as for the country, and leadership of the Democratic Party is in very bad shape right now. They have made clear that their goal is to keep the occupation of Iraq and Bush and Cheney around until November 2008, believing this will help them win elections. Rahm Emanuel has told the Washington Post that this is their strategy. Congressional staffers tell me this frequently. And the occupation and impeachment fit together here, not just because there are so many impeachable offenses related to the occupation, but also because trying to end the occupation would lead to impeachment. Congressman Brad Sherman asked General Petraeus, what would he do if Congress ended the occupation but Bush illegally kept it going? And Petraeus said he'd have to ask his lawyer. But Sherman was right. Sherman was right to assume that Bush will not end the occupation as long as impeachment is off the table. Which is one more reason the Democrats will avoid a serious effort to end the occupation unless we force them to act. The thinking on the Hill right now is that if enough Democrats sign that letter and stand firm, Pelosi will go with a bill to please the Republicans and win their votes. Pelosi operates in accordance with George Stephanopoulos' myth that she simply must pass a bill, any bill. In fact, when you get away from the topic of war, on every other issue this Congress can address, the consensus among Democrats is that they have 2 choices. One is to pass atrocities, like the Protect America Act, which Bush will sign. This was the bill that erased the 4th Amendment and legalized unconstitutional spying. And I figure when they get around to the Love, Harmony, and Joy Act, we can all be prepared to be murdered immediately. The second option, as they see it, is to pass bills and have them vetoed. Of course, they know in advance that it's all theater, that their bills are destined to be vetoed. But they view their whole job as a permanent election campaign, and they don't think the public will catch on to what they're doing. I think there's a third option. Impeach Bush and Cheney, remove them from office, and then pass bills that mean something. With these guys in office, even bills that are signed into law are altered or reversed by signing statements. And these are not just empty statements. The Government Accountability Office studied a sample of Bush's signing statements and found that in 30% of them, his administration has gone ahead and violated the laws that he announced he had the right to violate. So while I applaud groups like the ACLU for again and again pushing to redundantly recriminalize torture, I long for the ACLU of 1973 that had the decency to stand for impeachment. Depicting Pelosi and Reid as sheep in advertisements is all very good, but not if we're sheep too. Not if we go along with the removal of impeachment from our Constitution, which leaves Congress no options other than being sheep. The purpose of impeachment is not just to take back control of our government, not just to end the occupation or prevent an attack on Iran. The purpose is to inform future presidents that they must obey laws. But this is not something that concerns many Congress members. Their chief concerns tend to be whether the next president will belong to their party. 20 Congress members have signed on to HRES 333. And a very technical point, if you look up HR 333, you won't find it. You have to look up HRES 333. This is Kucinich's bill to impeach Cheney. I just always get applause just mentioning that bill exists. Many more signed on to the Gonzales bill, or signed on during the last Congress to the Conyers bill for a preliminary impeachment investigation. And others have said publicly and others have said privately that they favor impeachment. But these members have not signed on to Kucinich's bill on Cheney and not introduced their own on Cheney or Bush. I've spoken to a lot of them, and their staff. I've spoken to a lot of them and their staff and to constituents who've spoken to them, and they have about 15 excuses, most of which are very easily rejected, a few of which it is going to be very, very hard, but not impossible for us to get around. And I'm sure there are more excuses on the flyers in the back of the room that we can talk about. Excuse number one, you can't judge articles of impeachment prior to a committee investigation. That gets the process out of order. This is a criticism of Kucinich's bill, which lays out 3 specific charges against Cheney. Inslee's bill on Gonzales got around this by simply proposing that the Judiciary Committee investigate whether Gonzales has committed impeachable offenses. A new bill could do the same for Bush or Cheney and would not have to be wholly devoid of content. It could suggest the area or areas for inquiry. Excuse number 2, we don't have all the facts we need in order to impeach. Well, of course, that's what an impeachment investigation is for. But in fact, we do have the facts. The Judiciary Committee in 1974 passed an article of impeachment against Nixon for refusing to comply with subpoenas. Bush and Cheney and Rice have indisputably refused to comply with subpoenas. That one is an instant impeachment, just add backbone or ping pong balls. The signing statements is another instant impeachment. So is Bush's confessed violation of FISA, although it's complicated politically by Congress's recent legalization of his crimes. Bush is on videotape being warned about Hurricane Katrina and on videotape claiming he was not. He and Cheney are on videotape lying about the reasons for war, and the evidence that they knew they were lying is overwhelming. That is the impeachable offense our founding fathers worried the most about. But James Madison and George Mason also both argued at the Constitutional Convention that we need impeachment in case a president ever pardons someone for a crime he himself was involved in. The commutation of Scooter Libby's, another ass-kissing little chicken shit, sentence is another obvious impeachment. The list is endless. Congressman John Conyers has published a lengthy book documenting many of the felonies and abuses of power. Excuse number 3, impeachment would take too long. Nixon took 3 months. Clinton took 2. They have spent 9 thus far, avoiding it with very little to show for that. Impeachment for refusal to comply with subpoenas would take 1 day. Excuse number 4, impeachment would distract from other things. Yeah? Like what? Since when is restoring the Bill of Rights a distraction? A distraction from funding wars and legalizing spying is okay with me. A distraction from passing bills that will be vetoed does not concern me. Excuse number 5, we need to focus on ending the war. Okay, but if you focus on ending the war for 2 full years and you don't actually end the war, I wish you luck getting people to turn out next November. When Congress moved toward impeachment of Richard Nixon, it found the nerve to end a war, and he backed off on his veto threats. Congress passed a menu of progressive legislation in part because of, not despite, the movement for impeachment hanging over Nixon's head. And ultimately, of course, impeachment is going to be needed to end the current occupation of Iraq. Excuse number 6, impeachment would be divisive. I think we just heard this from a local congresswoman. It's not true among Democrats. 80% want impeachment. But as far as bipartisan harmony on Capitol Hill goes, the danger of creating divisiveness is sort of like the danger of violence breaking out if we leave Iraq. It's too late. And it's too late because the Republicans, never give a damn about bipartisan harmony. Were they in the majority with a Democratic president holding the record for unpopularity, they would long ago have impeached him and forced every Democratic Congress member to either defend him or run away from their own party. Does anybody remember Al Gore picking Joe Lieberman as a running mate and behaving as if he'd never met Bill Clinton? That was the result of an impeachment without a Senate conviction. My friend John Nichols says impeachment is not a constitutional crisis. It's the cure for the one we're in. Aspirin is not a headache crisis. Impeachment is not a constitutional crisis. Excuse number 7, we don't have the votes in the House to impeach. Well, you would if Pelosi whipped on it. And Congress members back bills every day that are not predicted to pass. If their colleagues fail to join them, that's between their colleagues and their colleagues' constituents. And again, impeachment usually does its work without getting all the way to impeachment. A move to impeach for refusal to comply with subpoenas, for example, might just result in compliance with subpoenas. And it is the only thing. This is the only way they might force compliance with subpoenas. They whine and moan about it all the time, but holding people in contempt through the courts, which they don't even have the nerve to do, will take forever and probably fail. Inherent contempt is a tool Congress does not have the backbone for, and they're not about to use either of these on Bush or Cheney. Excuse number 8, we don't have the votes in the Senate to convict. Well, you might, if you put the crimes on television and if the House impeached. But you would do good for the nation, not to mention the Democrats, if the House impeached with or without the Senate. Nothing would identify better the senators to be removed from office than an acquittal in the Senate. And impeachment, with or without conviction, in the Senate would reverse the public perception of the Democrats as having no spine or ping pong balls. They may hold even in the next elections without impeaching anyone or getting us out of Iraq, but if they want to win new seats, and if they want to win the White House with a large enough majority not to have it stolen, they will reverse their positions and begin to act. Excuse number 9. I won't sign on to Kucinich's bill because he hasn't asked me to, and he's a liberal, and he's running for president. Well, you know, Mr. Congressman, Ms. Congresswoman, this is the government of the world's largest, most powerful empire. This is not high school. We expect you to sign on to a bill based on the merits of the bill, or to introduce your own, or to shut up. Excuse number 10. You can't impeach over policy differences or because you don't like war. You have to impeach for a real crime. Well, Kucinich's bill focuses on felonies committed by the vice president, including misleading the Congress, and the crime of threatening an aggressive war on Iran. Cheney is on videotape making those threats. Conyers' book lists a long list of felonies. But in fact, not every crime is an impeachable offense, and not every impeachable offense is a crime. When Nixon cheated on his taxes, or Clinton cheated on his wife and lied about it under oath, no impeachable offenses were committed. When Nixon lied to the public, or when Bush ignored warnings prior to 9/11, no crimes were committed, but those offenses were impeachable. Excuse number 11. If I backed impeachment, the media would be mean to me. This is serious. Comes up in every conversation with a Congress member or a staffer. And the answer, I think, begins with, yes, but if you don't, people will die. Which is worse? A majority backs impeachment now for Cheney, and a majority or close to it for Bush. Those numbers will go up, not down, if you act, regardless of what the media says. You know those 18% of Americans who support the job you're doing there in Congress? Even they don't like the media. No campaign email raises more money than the one that begins, "Fox News just attacked me." That's 11 excuses that I think we can refute. The next 4 I think are harder to get around. Excuse number 12. Impeachment would make Bush and Cheney sympathetic and rally people around them. Now, the idea of making Cheney, in particular, an object of sympathy may seem ludicrous. But then so did the idea that Saddam Hussein was about to attack us with unmanned aerial vehicles. Common sense is not enough in Washington, D.C. We need hard numbers. I think Congress should start with Cheney and watch as Republicans are forced to abandon him. The Republicans would have done this to the Democrats years ago. The idea that impeachment would help Bush and Cheney originated with Republican National Committee talking points published in May of 2006, which Pelosi immediately adopted as her own. It flies in the face of the historical record. When the Republicans have moved to impeach, as against Truman, for example, they benefited at the polls. When the Democrats tried to impeach Nixon, they won the biggest victories anybody remembers. And remember, Nixon was popular compared to Cheney or Bush. When they promised not to impeach Reagan with the exact same arguments so they could win the next elections, they lost the next elections. They gave us the Bush dynasty. The exceptional case is the Clinton impeachment, which was uniquely unpopular. Nonetheless, the Republicans hung on to both houses of Congress and the White House. In fact, they lost very few seats, fewer than is the norm at that point in the tenure of a majority in a House of Congress. The Democrats may be risking more by not impeaching than they would be risking by doing it. But unless we can get polls done in swing districts that show overwhelmingly that Democrats will lose seats by not impeaching, they are unlikely to act. This is what their staffers tell me, and polls showing they'd gain seats by impeaching may not be enough if they think they'll still do okay without impeaching. And we will have to show that Republicans save their seats by backing impeachment if we want any Republicans to act. Of course, this is all utterly disgusting. Human life and the future of democracy are not concerns that even come up. It's all about elections. Excuse number 13, impeachment would remind people of Bill Clinton. Would that be so horrible? I mean, I was not a fan of Bill Clinton, but compared to Bush and Cheney, he looks like a saint. Excuse number 14, Nancy Pelosi opposes impeachment. Excuse number 15, Hillary Clinton opposes impeachment. The way we bring these people around is to show that the Democrats have a better chance at the White House as the party with backbone and integrity than as the party that just isn't the Republicans. So what can we do? There's quite a few things we can do. First of all, please raise your hand if to rid the world of Bush, you would do for him what Monica did for Bill. All right. We have 9 patriotic volunteers. Okay, but it may not be needed. It may not be needed. There is a saying that goes like this: let's save our pessimism for better times. We can't afford the luxury of pessimism. While there are things Congress refuses to even consider, like ending the occupation or impeaching Cheney or Bush, there are also things that we, as citizens, have a responsibility to consider but rarely do. We can shut down our Congress members' offices, as is planned here locally, with endless repeated sit-ins. We can make it impossible for them to work. That changes the whole calculation. We can shut down the city of Washington. Any self-respecting nation on this planet would have done so long ago. The next big march is on the 29th of this month, with a week of activities starting the 22nd leading up. If we bring 1 million people on the 29th and refuse to leave, if we block the streets and fill the jails, all bets and probably all wars are off. Now, whether we can manage such feats or not, if we keep building and pushing an impeachment movement, not only do we communicate to the world our good intentions, but we are prepared should some new event help trigger a pulse in the corpse of Congress. And we need to hope that that event is not an attack on the people of Iran. We can also organize in and do polling in swing districts to try to show the electoral advantage of doing what is right. We can also keep pressuring key Congress members, like Congressman Wexler and Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz. Both are on the Judiciary Committee. The latter is on the relevant subcommittee. We can do this through local media activism, PR, letters to the editors, calls to shows, through visits, phone calls, emails, faxes, letters, postcards, posters, billboards, which many cities are doing now, and through honk to impeach events, where you hold posters that say honk to impeach at the street in front of their office, and through events where we sit in and read the Constitution aloud and refuse to leave. Knock on their doors and talk to them face to face. There are a number of Congress members that have signed on to Kucinich's bill. When I asked them, will you sign on this bill? Sure, why not? It's absolutely aggravating, but it makes a difference to ask them face to face. We can also take our demands directly to the people that Congress listens to, the media. The fact is that if we had Fox News and if the other outlets behaved the way they do now, in 1974, Nixon would never have left. Today, the media does not cover the crimes, the evidence, or the public outrage, and does not even poll the public's opinions on impeachment. Except for good radio shows. The Downing Street minutes we forced into the news 2.5 years ago, and at least half the credit goes to progressive radio and the rest to the blogosphere. And we did it by flooding the media with phone calls and emails and protests in their lobbies. That needs to continue. Taking the all-consuming focus off the elections that are over a year away would give us a healthier democracy, but we also need to think in terms of electoral threats, or we are taking our power off the table the same way that Congress has. We should promote primary challengers who use the issue of impeachment. There are a lot of them already. We should promote third-party general election challengers who use the issue of impeachment. So this may not be nonpartisan, but it's multi-partisan at least, and there are many of them already. To refuse to make those challenges, I think, is to fail to grasp the gravity of our situation. In terms of the presidential race, there is something that we really have not considered. If every person who likes Dennis Kucinich but believes he can't win were to send him $100, he would win easily. And the fact would influence Congress immediately. So be the change you want to see in the world. No sleep till impeachment. Thank you.